Well, I'm the best corner in the game. What a run! Marshawn Lynch, get off me!
DK. Hey, it's John Schneider with Seattle Seahawks.
That's the result you want.
This offense, just in general. I mean, you had
To
a
me,
guy
just
like
watching
that.
his film, he seems more of a back.
Just the presence he's got in that pocket, the way he throws the football. Rust days, man. All the scrutiny that line was under.
This Monday night's big.
Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Hawk Zone Rundown with Armac, with B Rice. We got a lot to talk about, but before we get into that, guys, really quick, if you like what you're hearing, like what you're seeing, go down there, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification button, and hit the like button. And then that notification button is going to let you know when future episodes are dropping. So you guys won't miss anything because it's been a busy off season. And just between the last episode and this episode, a couple of things that happened. Something we talked about, Bryce, was Tyler's restructure. We're going to get into that with Chris Cluff coming on the show in a few minutes. Going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the QB situation. You know, obviously Gino is currently the guy, but you know, the draft's coming up and there's a lot of guys that we like. We talked about that last time too. So we're going to get Chris's thoughts on who he likes coming out of this draft, because we both think that you know, they're definitely going to take one. And then you know, just get into it with them about his view of the offseason, potential free agents now that it looks like they're freeing up a lot of money that they can go after somebody. And yeah, so we're going to dive into all that stuff. And you know, real quick, Rissa, just get your thoughts. Obviously, a couple of moves the last couple of days. Tyler's restructured. That was huge.
Yeah, no, it was huge. And like we had kind of discussed, it was one of two options with Tyler. It was either they were going to keep Tyler and restructure him, or it was going to be, Tyler, you need to make a decision on what you're doing with your career. You might be playing somewhere else or you're retiring. And with this situation, it was very telling to me when John Schneider on his show on 710 said, I hope I don't have to make any more moves with cutting players and stuff like that. And to me, I took that as, okay, the hammer is going to drop with whatever happens with Tyler now. Like, they're going to either, again, restructure him like they did, which I think is the right move to do.
Yeah.
Or they were going to move on from Tyler. And I think Tyler got told that and thought about it for a day or two and then decided, hey, look, you know what? I want to stay in Seattle. And I think this is Tyler's last contract in Seattle. I think he's going to be done either next year or the year after because the cap hit isn't as bad. And you know, if we go back and we look at our checklist of things to do and every lever that needed to be pulled to create cap space now, John Schneider pulled about every lever that you can. You know, they moved on from a lot of the players we said, and you know, everyone was surprised by Diggs.
Yeah.
You and me said Diggs needed to go from the beginning just because you weren't going to bring him back long term. He wasn't, you know, a solution. I've heard on other podcasts them talking about, you know, Diggs played so well and he was, you know, he's not, you know, you're not going to find that center fielder anymore. And it's like, but the NFL doesn't play that defense anymore. Pete's not here anymore. Like, people need to realize that Pete's defense is gone.
Right.
It's not here in Seattle anymore. We have a new scheme, a new coach that's going to run it. So positions that we used to have that were huge things for Seattle's defense, the single high safety that could roll in the middle like Earl and Quandre did, we don't need that anymore. And that's something that I think people need to kind of wrap their heads around of, like, you know, I get Quandre was a great guy. I loved Quandre as a player, but Quandre never, after his injury, did he ever get back to the ball hawking player that he was pre-breaking his leg in Arizona. Outside of that, Blore needed to go. Jamal needed to go. I don't know if Jamal ever plays again. I think Jamal's probably done. You know, I think Quandre will get on with something, but, and just so for everyone that may come into our comment section and give me grief, look at the safety market as it is right now. So many high talented safeties are sitting on the market because the position is not as valued as it once was in the NFL, mainly because you look at the receiving cores. You don't have monster receivers like Randy Moss, Terrell Owens, Calvin Johnson. We have DK. Most teams don't, that are running deep posts, deep goes down the middle, that you need a safety back there that's going to be able to take him on. Ed Reed, Troy Polamalu, those type of players. Now you need corners, you need edge rushers, you need safeties back there. Like, if I get a guy that's back there that's serviceable, comes downhill and makes tackles laterally, like on the jet sweeps and stuff, to like the Deebo Samuel type guys, I'm fine with that. And that's okay. And if I don't have to pay my safety room $40 million between two players, I'm going to be much better off for it.
Yeah, I think we both agree with the Quandre thing, and guys say, well, he played good. Why would you cut him? But like you said, you hit on all the points. The game is different. He's also now on the other side of 30. He has had major injuries, and he's got 1 year. He had 1 year left. You weren't going to re-sign him. So what was the point? You knew it was going to happen. The only way it wasn't if you were like, okay, maybe because we're cutting both guys at the same time. But they know what they're doing. And then there's the draft. We have Julian Love. We got other guys to step up. And like you said, it's not as valued anymore. But you know what? We're gonna get Chris's thoughts on all this on the other side. So Chris Cluff coming up right after the break. Hey guys, with us tonight is former writer of the Seattle Times, also has his blog, CHawk Talk, author of a couple of books. Chris Cluff back on the show with us. Chris, thanks for coming on tonight and talking Seahawks.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. It's great to see you again.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, let's dive into it. The quarterback situation's kind of been a big talk for the last quite some time now, right? We weren't really sure, with the hiring of Mike Macdonald and Schneider's comments, you sort of really had to read into, what sort of was the meaning behind a lot of it, right? It was like you weren't sure. They never came out and saying Gino is our guy. This is the guy, and we just can't wait to go to work with them, right? Then the restructuring of the signing bonus and all that stuff happens, and then Bryce and I were like, okay, well, what is we're still not clear, right? What's your overall take now with Gino, and also heading into this draft, because there's also guys that we like in this draft a lot, and obviously not talking about the first couple of guys, but and we also think that John will pick a QB at some point in the draft. So what are your thoughts with Gino and the comments that have been swirling around the last few weeks, and maybe a future guy coming to this draft for Seattle?
Yeah, I think they left it open-ended. Even when they restructured his bonus, it felt like they were still open. They would only have, I think it was like a $600,000 cap hit extra they would have taken if they had traded him after converting that. So I feel like John Schneider went to the combine, talked to the people he always talks to. Didn't really feel like there was anything brewing as far as being able to trade Gino for anything that he would want to trade him for. That's not to say that maybe someone said, hey, I'll give you a 6th round pick for Gino or something silly, So yeah. I feel like he was open to it. And I feel like he just went to Indianapolis thinking, okay, let's see what conversations happen. And when that didn't happen, the report came out that the Seahawks had told Gino, you're going to be on the team, you're on our roster. And then Mike Macdonald the other day on KJR talked about it a little bit more, but also didn't expressly state that he is the starter for sure. So clearly they are open to, as you guys alluded to, drafting a quarterback, looking at all their different options. And there's a lot, this team is going to change. I mean, it's going to change. I mean, they've done everything that we talked about last time, about all the moves that they could possibly make to clear up cap space. They've done almost every single thing we talked about. Almost every single thing. Like Nick Bellora was the last move. They cut him today. We talked about that. We talked about Tyler Lockett possibly being restructured. They did that. Every single move they have made. So they have cleared up. They've got over $50 million in space now. 40 million really that they can use for vets, because you got to apportion some stuff for later on. But say that's like 40 to 43 somewhere in there. Totally could re-sign Leonard Williams. That might happen any minute now. And then I feel like they're going to be a little more aggressive. Last year they signed Draymond Jones to the biggest deal they've ever signed an outside free agent to. So I feel like John Schneider is getting in his aggressive mode now as far as free agency, a little bit more than he has in the past.
Yeah, that was the one thing I kind of thought too, Chris. When you saw all these moves and all these levers finally being pulled, it was kind of like, because everyone was talking about, oh, they're still going to try and compete in 2024 to make the playoffs and so on. And when I saw him jettison all this kind of dead cap or players that needed to go that in a lot of ways were peak guys, Quandre, Jamal, a lot of these guys, were kind of peak guys. it made me even think even more back to the comments about Geno not necessarily being the starter, but being on the roster as we're using you as a hedge against the draft because we're okay if we swing and take, say, a Michael Penix or a JJ McCarthy or somebody like that. And we're not, a 10-win team this year. We're again a 7 to 9 win team, but we've added some free agency and we're setting ourselves up for 2025. And that's kind of what I felt because you got rid of all this dead weight that you could still get rid of next year if you want to, but you got rid of it now. You took Jamal's hit this year. I think it even leads more to what 2025 is going to look like with their free agency now that they won't have Jamal on the books or any of that stuff, like all that dead cap space, the 34 million of it or whatever that they're accumulating this year will be off the books as of next year. So I think it's going to be a really interesting. I agree with you. I think he's going to be much more aggressive. I think it's Jeremy Fowler from ESPN says that he believes in who he's talked to that Patrick Queen and Geno Stone and some of these Ravens guys want to come over to Seattle. And I could see it where they may not take the highest end deal to come play for Mike McDonald because they know how much he's done to kind of resurrect some of their careers, actually all three of them realistically. So I think it's going to make it very interesting in the next, 72 to 48 hours, what happens here in Seattle.
Yeah, I think that I told you guys before that I felt like Mike McDonald probably would want to bring at least one of his guys over from Baltimore to help facilitate the learning of his defense. And so it's not a surprise to me that Patrick Queen is on that list, or it would be hilarious to see Jadeveon Clowney back here again, and Geno Stone. Those were the three I think that were listed in that report. But
Yeah.
I feel like that is an extreme possibility. I'm not sure how much money they really want to pay because Patrick Queen's probably going to command quite a bit. And I think Geno Stone would be a cheaper buy for them because the safety market is just flooded now with all those guys who were released, including the ones, that you mentioned, Jamal and Quandre. So there's there are levels of economics that they want to look at as far as whether they, and to your point, maybe they take a little bit less to come play for Mike McDonald, but I'm not sure when you have free agency and you're ready to cash in big, in the prime of your career like Patrick Queen is, that he's really maybe going to do that. But he might. You never know.
Were you surprised how quickly they released Jamal? I know we threw around the post June 1st date, but they were just like boom, three guys all the same day: Quandre, Will, and Jamal. Were you surprised at how quick? Does that kind of point to direction like we just want to clean house and get ready and make a huge dive into free agency?
I wasn't surprised because I felt like they were going to cut Jamal immediately. I didn't think they were going to make him a June guy. And then also when John Schneider spoke, I think it was maybe on his radio show recently, he basically he basically said he left it was very lukewarm about Jamal Adams, right? So he didn't, there was no commitment there. And it's like, we're still going through that. Really, what that meant was what we all think is going to happen is going to happen. So I wasn't surprised that they just lopped them all. The only guy that I had a question mark about, and I think we talked about Quandre a little bit, was would Mike McDonald think he fit? And would they try to do something with his contract, or would they just let him go too and take the cap money back, which is what they ended up doing. So I was not surprised by any move that they made so far. All these moves are moves that I put out that I figured they could or most likely would do. And I didn't think that they were going to cut Lockett. I did not think Tyler Lockett was going to be gone. I think I probably told you guys that too. I thought that maybe if anything, they would do a restructure, which is what they did. So yeah.
Yeah, no, and that's going to be the interesting thing is, you look at Quandre, and me and Ryan kind of got on the bandwagon more about, Quandre not being a part of this because I didn't see him getting brought back past this year. He was still on a 1-year deal, basically, for this year. It didn't really matter if you cut him or not. The cap savings didn't matter if you cut him post June, whatever it may ended up being. But yeah, the thing for me with Tyler's situation, Chris, because I know you were one of the few people that we talked to that was like, yes, Tyler will be on this roster, was when John said in his 710 show, I think this past week, I hope I don't have to cut anybody else. Like, I hope that I'm done making these moves. For me, that was, okay, Tyler's now that last hammer to fall. Either you're going to restructure Tyler or we're moving on from you, kind of a thing, as I think what that conversation was, or that comment was alluding to. And I'm glad Tyler did restructure because I think this will be Tyler's last contract in Seattle. I think he either plays out this year or he plays out the 2 years of it. But it's such a friendlier cap hit considering that now you freed up more cap space to go get other weapons. He's probably going to see a reduced role, I think, in some aspects with JSN now being kind of that number two. So I think, yeah, that was definitely a very smart move by John to keep Tyler here, keep that three-headed monster, especially now that you don't know who your tight end's going to be, because you do not have anyone on the roster currently at this point.
That's true. Yeah, I feel like they wanted to keep Tyler, and Tyler, he seemed like the kind of guy who would be amenable to that. And but I totally agree with you, Bryce, that this is his last year in Seattle. They didn't change the next year. I mean, the way I looked at it, the way they presented the report, I don't think they did anything with next year, which means it's a $32 million hit next year. So I feel like they were basically just tweaking it for this year, and next year it's probably gone in whatever way. So this will be kind of his last hurrah. And you're right, JSN is ready to ascend to that number two.
Yeah, sticking with free agents here. Yeah, we I know we just mentioned Patrick Queen and how much money he could command. Um, we have a free agent linebacker of our own, well, couple, but you got Jordan Brooks there, right? And you looked at Queen under Mike McDonald, he sort of really emerged and took that next step. Do you see the same thing where, going maybe bringing Brooks back? Obviously, you're going to get him for a lot cheaper. What would you want to see here? Obviously, Leonard Williams is kind of everyone's in the opinion of the number one re-sign. So he's also going to command a lot, right? So I guess kind of a two-part question. I mean, realistically, what do you see? And then what would make more sense for Seattle?
I don't think the Seattle is going to break the bank to keep Brooks. So I think the projections I've seen are like 11 million a year, something in that zone. So do they think he's worth that, or would they rather pay Patrick Queen a little bit more because they think he's that much better than Brooks? Brooks is a tackling machine, no question about it. But as Dave Wyman would often tell you, that's because there are tackles to be made. Somebody's got to make the tackles. So like just volume of tackles does not mean anything. Just because he and Bobby Wagner are up there in the top 2 or 3 every year in tackles or whatever, that doesn't mean anything. It's about impact plays, and how many impact plays is a guy making. And on this defense in the last couple of years, there have been almost no impact plays, very few impact plays. And there's only, as we talked about before, maybe 4 core defenders who really merit, going forward. These are your guys. And we talked about, Mafe, how we think he's one of them. Wosu's one of them. If you re-sign Leonard Williams, he's one of them. Now, can Brooks be one? Yeah, I think he can. I think Mike McDonald can totally coach him into what he wants. But would Mike McDonald prefer to have somebody else, his own guy or a different guy? I mean, there are guys being released here and there, and some guys who might fit their scheme, might fit their coaches know. So yeah, there's. I don't think that Brooks. I think they have probably a number for Brooks, and if he gets better than that, they'll let him go.
Yeah, that makes sense. And what about what do you see with Bobby? I mean, I know when we brought him in last year, it was supposed to be sort of, not on the field as much as he was. He was on for almost every snap, right? I mean, especially third down wasn't really somewhere he was supposed to be. Like, do you see sort of Mike and the regime and John thinking, hey, okay, if we can use him how we intended to, would you kind of want him back here?
I felt like Wagner will not be back, and then there was a report that came out just a little while ago that said he is most likely not going to be back. Yeah, so he will go to free agency again and play somewhere else, and that's fine. Bobby Wagner was a great player for the Seahawks. He really was. He's a Hall of Famer for sure, but we've seen what his limitations are. And he's also getting up there in years. And Mike McDonald wants a younger roster, and John Schneider wants a younger roster for him. I guarantee you that. So Wagner, they will say thank you very much again for the second time and let him go. And they'll bring in guys that can grow with this defense, and perhaps that somebody who knows the defense already and can help other guys learn it. So Wagner, I think we're going to say a fond farewell to him for the last time this time.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Like the report came out, I kind of feel for Bobby, like he's going to go through the KJ Wright effect that KJ went through when he left Seattle. There wasn't a spot for him. They moved to Jordan and Bobby were the two guys left, and that was kind of it. And they kept having the revolving door, Kendricks and some other guys. But I look at Bobby and I think of only really two places I could see Bobby going. One being Washington because of Dan Quinn. Come in there, help build that, initial culture and that. Or I could see him going down to San Francisco on a cheap deal. And as much as people in our comment section may think I just spoke the worst thing ever, KJ right now is the linebacker coach down there in San Francisco. It's in California where Bobby's from. He's already relocated there once. They just locked Screenlaw in the Super Bowl. I think there's a lot of things that make sense. And, goes down there. The defense is familiar to what he's played for most of his career. He's not going to have to adjust to it much. I think Bobby ends up probably being in a 49er jersey, which has happened to a lot of the Seahawk legends that have decided to leave. They've ended up in that red and gold.
I think that would be kind of it would add a lot of more storylines, but they have Fred Warner too. So I'm not sure that if Wagner and Warner are basically the middle guys. So I'm not sure that Wagner really have a spot for him there, but it would be very interesting. And I think people on both sides would get a kick out of that, either positively or negatively, however you want to say it. But I think Wagner will find a spot for him. Washington's a great one, Bryce. I mean, that's with Dan Quinn that I could see something like that happening for sure. There's a place for him. He's still a good player. And if you put a good front in front of him, like a really good line, he can still be a good player. And like we talked about last time, if you play him forward, play him aggressive, play him don't make him go chasing these guys at age 35 or whatever, just send him in there and let him make the plays, because he can still make plays behind the line of scrimmage, make impact plays for the defense up front, not in the back end, but on the front side. So I think Wagner's still got good years left, at least a couple.
So with that being said, and kind of looking at, free agency, we talked a lot about linebackers. We hope Leonard Williams is back. What other positions do you think Seattle could look to address before the draft? Because we all know John likes to have his board or his roster pretty much filled going in, so he doesn't have to stress for a need. What do you think are other spots that they're going to really prioritize? Like if you had to rank positionally prioritization for Seattle, what do you think their next big priority need is going to be?
Yeah, so Leonard Williams is obviously priority number one to resign. Then you've got to get linebackers. So whoever it is, whether Brooks is back or you're bringing in other ones, you've got to sign a couple vets for sure there. And you need a veteran safety for sure. They're obviously on the hunt for safeties because they're already bringing them in. And then I also understand that they're not satisfied with their pass rush, and they're also expected to look around for pass rushers too. So defensively, it's kind of there's a point at every level that they're looking for guys, at least one or two guys. And then going to the offense. You want to go to the offense as well?
Yep,
sure.
Yep.
Yeah, so on offense, they need that interior offensive line, because I'm not sure. Maybe they're okay leaning on second-year guys at center and at right guard, but obviously there's a hole at left guard because Damian Lewis is a free agent right now. Maybe they re-sign him, but maybe that's somewhere that they spend a little bit to get somebody who's not Damian Lewis, but who's maybe a little bit of an upgrade. Maybe they look at center. Maybe Olu's not really the guy they want to lean on right now, but I felt like there were some positive comments about him at the combine, so that maybe they're thinking positively about him, and maybe the draft also they think maybe we'll bring an option there, but they're okay. Like you said, Bryce, Schneider just wants to cover his holes, right? Cover all the gaps, and so maybe they feel like they already have the center covered, but they can add to that in the draft. But left guard obviously is a big hole, and then we also need to consider right tackle. I don't think that was a firm Abe Lucas is great comment from Schneider. And no. I think a lot of fans and us, a lot of people who are watching are not completely convinced that Abe Lucas, that surgery fixed his ails, so we will see about that. And we'll also see by what they do in the draft or whatever, whether they add to right tackle. And that will tell us how concerned they maybe are about Abe Lucas as well.
Yeah,
tight end. I forgot tight end, but you mentioned tight end already. They have no tight ends, so they need some tight ends.
Yeah, I was just going to touch on that. I mean, the interior line for sure. We were high. we were high on Olu. I mean, still are, right? It's just like you said, you rely on that second year guy, or do you try to get that veteran, right? To really, because we looked with, if you go with Geno, and then you look at sort of like, you look at the team like the Lions and what they had with Goff and stuff like that, similar kind of players in a way, but just he had just a better interior line, and just you saw what he could do with that. So if they roll with Geno, it'd be nice to say, hey, at least we can focus and shore up that interior. And then I guess getting your thoughts. I mean, the offense just seems like a little more stable, obviously skill position wise, right? You especially with Lockett now, and then there's your three-headed monster receiver. Your backs seem to be set. Tight end. I mean, what would you like to see there? Would you like them to say, hey, kind of offer Colby Parkinson something, and kind of have their number, because we sort of like the trajectory he was going, or do you maybe throw a small, or Fance, but he's probably going to demand a little more money. What are your thoughts on that? Or do you just completely go in a different direction, tight
No,
end?
I think Parkinson would be good, but what's their number for him? Because
Right.
I see that he might get somewhere around 7 million. That's the projection. And you've seen some of the Dalton Schultz's deal, Hunter Henry, those guys both signed. Schultz got 12 million a year. Henry got less than that, but 10 million, maybe 9 million, so maybe 9 million. So those guys, I mean, if you say Parkinson, he doesn't have quite the resume of those two guys. So maybe 6 or 7 million is a projection amount for him. And maybe, but do the Seahawks agree with that? Do the Seahawks think that that's the number for him? So I think it comes down to, they really, they pick numbers. They're like, this is the value that we value this player at. And if you can go get better, congratulations and good luck. And that's often how it goes. So there's wiggle room in there. Obviously, maybe they're willing to go up a couple million, or the way they structure it, maybe more guaranteed money up front, and that sways the player to come or stay, or however, whoever the player is. So yeah, Parkinson is one of those where it's like, I'm really curious what they value at him at and what he gets. That's one guy I'm really curious about. But otherwise, they might just be cheap at tight end and see what the draft brings or something like that too.
Yeah, no, I between it, like, out of Seattle's tight ends, they've obviously I'm looking at PFF right now. Noah Fant projected at a 28 million, $29 million total contract over 3 years at 9.5 million a year. And then, like you said, Parkinson's at 3 years, 6.5 million, so 20 million overall. Between the two, I would lean to re-signing Colby Parkinson. I also think he fits better in what Ryan Grubb's system is coming over. Now, obviously, we still have to see what Ryan Grubb wants to do, but based off what Ryan Grubb have done for the last 2 years, Colby adds a lot more, I think, to that kind of equation with his run blocking, because between him and Noah Fant, Colby's a far better run blocker, because that's what he was brought, kind of weirdly enough, in to do when he shouldn't have been initially. But I think if Seattle's smart, I would bring back Colby, and then I would draft somebody. I'd go in there and get someone in the 4th or 5th round. But I look at, there's so much upside still with Colby. He's only 25. You get into a 3-year deal. He's only 28 when he re-hits the market. And if all of a sudden his numbers go up and he moves on, you still got a good chunk of time to actually, because he really, he hasn't seen the field a whole heck of a lot in his 3 years in Seattle. Like you were saying, he doesn't have a large sample size compared to a lot of the other guys. Like last year, he played under 500 snaps. The year before that, under 500 snaps. And his first year in the league, he was only on under 200 snaps. So when you look at a lot of these other guys that are out in the market, there's a lot more to view and to be like, hey, this is what you're getting value-wise. People might be afraid of Parkinson a little bit because they don't know what they're going to get for their value. If they overpay him and pay him some ridiculous number because they get scared and we need a tight end. Hopefully Seattle doesn't do that, but I could see another team kind of doing that, because they have like Hunter Henry on here, 4 years older, way bigger sample size, projecting to only get a 2-year deal worth $12 million. But the annual average is about the same as Colby Parkinson.
Yeah, I feel like that it's definitely going to be a projection with Parkinson, but as you just said, he's an ascending player. We've seen that already. When you give him more snaps, he gives you more production. So his production has been equaling his snaps. So relative ratio wise. So I feel like if they see that in him, if Ryan Grubb feels like what you just said, like that he's a fit, then they'll be interested in paying him. But if some other team comes out there and says, okay, we're giving him $8 million a year, I don't think Seattle's going to be on that. I don't think that they would value him that high. Although let's give the caveat that John Schneider loves to overpay his tight ends, as we saw with Will Dissly. So
no, I do not want another Will Dissly contract in Seattle. I'm sorry, but that to me was that might have been one of John's worst decisions. The value that they sent that for, it was, that was so bad.
definitely one of his probably three worst re-signs, I would say.
Yes, I would agree with you on that. Definitely one of his three worst re-signs for sure. So overall, Chris, like, what is your view of this offseason? Like, overall, like, how do you, compared to what you thought going in when, Pete was still here to where we are now, do you think it's been a positive progression, kind of shock and awe, obviously, or do you think there's been some negatives to it? Because there is always the possibility for negatives when you switch coaching staffs and flip everything over. But what's kind of your vibe on how the offseason's gone so far?
First of all, I was totally on board, as you guys know, with firing Pete Carroll. So start there. It was time. Nobody was listening to him anymore. His coaching had gotten tired and they just were, as to use John Schneider's word, stagnant. So, and then the McDonald hire, I'm really excited for it. I feel like this guy knows what he's up to, even though he's so young, half Pete's age. But he's coming in there with an incredible resume for the short amount of time he's actually been at high level football. And I think he's going to really flip things for Seattle really fast on defense. And as Ryan mentioned, the Seahawks have a lot of skill players already. So here comes Ryan Grubb from a high-powered, big-time college, UW. And speaking of negatives, could be the one negative, is this guy has no pro experience whatsoever. So, and I think I mentioned this when we talked last time. For me, the offensive coordinator, the success of an offensive coordinator is all about how they can adjust in game. So do you come in with a plan that you can adjust based on something being taken away that you didn't foresee, perhaps? So to me, that will be how, both for Mike Macdonald as the head coach and Ryan Grubb as offensive coordinator, these guys need to be able to adjust and flex. And if something's not working, you got to find the thing that does work, or you lose the game. So there's too much of that happens at all levels of football, because coaches are too rigid. And I know Mike Macdonald has made a point that he's not rigid, and that he does flex, and that he does want to put all of his guys in the best position possible to succeed. He does want the other team to feel like they're playing against 12 or 13 guys on both sides, going both ways. So this is I love all those things, and chasing edges and all that stuff he's talking about now. So I love all that stuff. So all those are positives, with the caveat of there's not a lot of experience there from the offensive perspective of it. And then as far as all the moves they've made, they've done every move that we talked about and that I felt they should do and they would do, and they've done them all. So now we're poised. We're right on the precipice of free agency here, and Leonard Williams should be their first domino to fall, hopefully coming back, and then on we go.
Yeah, I like what you said about Grubb, and that we're excited about Grubb, but obviously the unknown, right? Your first time in the pros, right? Obviously, a lot of creative, great stuff you're doing down in college, but like you said, how do you make those in-game changes? And that's something that we've had issues with our past coordinators. But if you look at Grubb, what do you see, kind of envision, just based on stuff he's done in Washington, his time in college and stuff? What do you envision him doing with this offense? Like, we've talked about DK a lot, right? And especially, and with you on the show as well, and how we feel like he just wasn't much of a focal point that he should have been. Do you see that changing a bit with Grubb, and at least moving guys around more, and that creativity factor, aside from the how you're going to adapt in the middle of the game, but just that kind of stuff on the offense? Like, what kind of excites you about this guy here?
Yeah, I think you're talking about how is he going to use the personnel properly. I think we've talked about
right.
that before, like you said. And you're right. DK was underutilized last year for sure. And I think that Grubb, he plays to his strengths. That's his history. So in Seattle, it depends on what the offensive line becomes. Like, it really starts there. If they put together an offensive line that can create a good running game with the two good backs that they have, and they're two very different backs, as we've also talked about before. So if they can get that going and they can take pressure off Geno, that opens up a lot just right there. Just being able to know that you're balanced and that your running game isn't just in neutral the whole game, and you really do have to throw the ball, and all of a sudden DK is getting double covered all the time, and you're reliant on the other guys to get open. So it's like, you guys know, it's all a big puzzle, and it has to fit together. And I feel like it always starts up front. I've said this to you guys, this is my third time on the show, and I probably said it 80 times already. It starts up front, like, and it really does.
Yeah,
I mean, you got to have a good O-line and a good D-line, and if you have those things and a good quarterback, it doesn't really matter what the skill level of a lot of the other guys are, because you will dominate so well there that it'll make up for any weaknesses you have at particular other positions. So that's how I look at football. I mean, that's how I see it. Bryce, you've coached football, when we talked about this, and we're in agreement, I think, on like the importance of things. So I would say that's do that, get the line going, and then you can actually do, Ryan, what we've talked about is utilize your guys a little bit better than you were before, because you were limited.
Yeah.
And that's the thing for me that I did like about the Grubb hire, considering who else they had in possibility, with Chip Kelly being an option. I think his name's Estrogen from Tanner from Detroit. I botched his name probably. I apologize. But thing with me about Grubb that I like, he's not a young age-wise coach. He's coached for a really long time. And you kind of go look at his college history. I know he hasn't coached in the NFL yet, but when he was in Eastern Michigan, they ran the hell out of the football. He goes to Fresno State, hooks up with the DeBoer, the passing game develops. But the one thing Ryan Grubb is, and he's very good at, is working with O-line and getting a very functional running game going. And people look at, Washington last year and they think they're this high-flying offense. But when you really look at the numbers, they had amazing time of possession and they ran the ball effectively. Even in some points, Grubb will admit, I ran the ball too much when I should have possibly thrown it more. And so for me, with him and Huff coming in, the O-line coach, I have a good feeling that they're going to use K9 and Charbonnet more effectively than Waldron ever did, and actually play to their strengths. They're probably going to switch from the zone system to a gap system, which I think will be very indicative if we start to see, like, say Seattle goes out and they get, Zeitler and maybe a Jonah Jackson, and you get these two guards. Those guys aren't zone guards. They are gap scheme, power running. And I think that would benefit, especially Charbonnet, because I think that was one area he struggled with last year in Seattle, was he's a downhill runner. Put the ball in my stomach. Let me go north-south. I'm not going east and west. And when Seattle started to do that with him, they started to have success. K9's your slasher. And me and Ryan kind of alluded to it at the beginning of the year, is I even said I could see a situation where Charbonnet is your first and second down, and K9 comes in as your change of pace back, because he is such a change of pace back. That didn't end up happening, but I think you're going to see Seattle's run game evolve, become more dynamic than what it's ever been, from Tom Cable to Shoddy to Shane Waldron. Because if you look at the Tom Cable years, it was more beast mode being beast mode than it was Tom Cable schemed up an amazing run game for us with blocks and all that. Like, we're talking about the J.R. Sweezy and Drew Nowak kind of reclamation projects on the O-line, yet Marshawn's still finding a way to run for 100 yards. And even Chris Carson with Shoddy. Like, Chris Carson was a monster running back. Injuries caught up with him because of the pounding. But when I watched Shane Waldron, I've rewatched a bunch of games, their run game was so anemic at points, where it just, like, it was like grasping for every breath it could just to get 3 yards. Looks so difficult. It's like, we need that run game. We need to be able to build in the trenches, get a clean pocket, because even if we draft a young quarterback like a Michael Penix, if we don't have any sort of interior presence, it won't matter what we draft. We're going to be screwed anyways.
Yeah, I mean, it's leading into the draft there, and you kind of mentioned that. Let's kind of talk a little bit about the draft now. Penix looks like he's kind of climbing up. He had a good combine. All the medicals came back good on him, and I feel like the Seahawks now couldn't get him in the high second round if they had traded down and kind of played around with that. I feel like he is going to be first rounder now, and if they really want him, they might have to take him right there at 16 and not fiddle around, not make any moves down, and just take him if they really want him. And that leads to the question of, okay, if they don't draft quarterback in the first round, do they take one later, like in the third, fourth round? Is there a guy like Spencer Rattler or Jones from Florida State? There's a few guys there. This kind of it comes down to the question of which kind of guy is their style of guy that they want, and maybe just kind of a development type guy. I mean, nobody thought anything of Russell Wilson when he was drafted in the third round. It was like, oh, he's way too short. Like he's this, what's that guy gonna ever do? And turns into the starter and a Super Bowl winner. So you never know. And then you let Brock Purdy, Mr. Irrelevant, Tom Brady, sixth rounder. So there's totally ways. There's all sorts of different ways you can find quarterbacks. So in the draft, if it's not in the first round, perhaps like you guys said, it sounds like you guys are really on that. You're like, yes, Schneider is finally going to draft a quarterback again. So the question is, when do you guys think he's going to do it? Do you think he's going to go first, or do you think he's going to go later?
I honestly think, and this is me and Ryan have talked about this offline, now that they've done this whole jettison of the Pete guys and all this dead money, this is where my outlook has kind of changed a little bit on what 2024 is. And I feel like they're truly trying to build for 2025 and 2026 in a way. They're still going to be competitive, but this is where I could see John at 16 going, you know what? I filled some of my holes in free agency. I'm going to swing now. And I honestly believe he's got the blessing from Jody to take that swing. And I think that swing might actually have more, in some respects, in job security for John, of actually finally taking a swing on a first round quarterback. He's made the comment numerous times, the combine, on his TV show, on his radio show, I've only taken two, and it bugs me. It bugs me I've only taken two, Russell and Alex Magoo, and most people probably forget Alex Magoo even existed. I think if Penix is there, because the one thing Penix offers you more than any of the other guys we've talked about, he can immediately come in my opinion, and push Geno to play, because he knows grind grub system, that terminology, that offense. And you know what? The fact that they haven't said Geno's the guy leads me to believe that if Michael Penix is there, that's who they may select. And, we've seen before in years where John's been like, yeah, I have to have all these picks. He hasn't really talked about that much this year, where he's like, I need all these picks. I need my 11 or 12 or 13 picks, which leads me to believe like there's a good chance they may just take Michael Penix sitting there. Or if JJ McCarthy falls, I think there's a good chance they take JJ McCarthy. And if either one of those two, for me, if they're not there, I'm on the Spencer Rattler, Jordan Travis from Florida State. Grab one of those two, because Rattler, again, I think can be a high upside starter in the league. And I think some people look at his character issues as a reason why he shouldn't be drafted higher. Throws a nice ball, had 2 really good years at South Carolina where he got his shit together personally on outside of that. And I think Jordan Travis would be higher up the draft board if he hadn't broken his leg this year at Florida State. I think that really set him back. And I think he could come in and be, everyone's enamored with Joe Milton in his arm and are calling him Anthony Richardson 2.0. I feel like Joe Milton is a backup at best with, the ability to come in and maybe play well for you for a couple of games throughout his NFL career because of those intangibles. But I don't see him being any sort of franchise type quarterback. I don't know. What about you, Ryan?
Yeah, I mean, I like Penix too. I think I agree with both you guys. I think this combine really rose his stock. I think like he just showed out at the combine. I think before the combine it was like, maybe you would be able to get this guy in a day 2 situation, but I think he put a lot of teams on notice there with that combine, and it was like, you know what, if you like this guy, take him at 16. And like we all were talking about, free agency is kind of a time where John wants to make sure he's kind of covered all his bases. If he can't do that, and there's some interior guy there, sure, but other than that, I think it's just a huge need. And then I just think there could be an open competition at camp, and if he's not ready to go, then you sit him for a year and you let Geno go, and then you groom him for 2025. So I think that's a nice luxury to have. And then after that, I'm also on the Spencer Rattler train. I think watching his film, and things he's done. He's such a gamer. He's sort of little mix of like got a little Baker in him, just with his intensity and that chip on his shoulder. He's not a big dude. And I go back and forth with the small quarterback thing all the time. But we had Russ here, obviously, but Kyler Murray, and then now they seem like they figured that out down in Arizona. So I'm not opposed to a small QB. We've had a successful small QB here. It's just how you build your offense around them, really. And so I'd actually be excited for Rattler. I'm not as high on JJ as Bryce is. I mean, he just doesn't excite me. I just think the intangibles that Penix has, I just think, and the familiar with Grubb, if that holds a bit of merit. I mean, obviously you got to see how Grubb does, at this level, but so those are my two guys. And I think, yeah, if he had Penix in here and he shows out at camp, then there's no reason why he also couldn't be the star. But I could see more, he's got would really have to put on a pretty amazing camp, because like Bryce was saying, 25, 26, set it up. So yeah, those would be my top two.
Now I
Yeah,
got a question for you, Chris.
yeah.
Where does Justin Fields factor in for you if you miss out on one of these guys? Do you see a situation where Seattle may take a flyer because, depending on Kirk Cousins, some of these other dominoes fall, come the draft, if Seattle misses out, say on Penix or Nix or McCarthy or one of their guys or a bunch of their guys, do they turn around and draft and trade for Justin Fields to bring him in and learn under Geno from a year because he is still young?
Yeah, a lot of that comes down to, will he already have been traded before the draft? So first of all, you were assuming that he hadn't been, and he's still, the Bears still have him. And if the Bears are taking Caleb Williams, then, or maybe they don't, maybe they trade out of the first and then they still have another top 10 pick, so they could still get a different quarterback. So if they do it that way, and so they're still looking to trade Fields. I thought about the Fields idea just because of Lamar Jackson, and wondering if Mike McDonald sees anything in Fields that reminds him of Lamar Jackson. And so I think that's probably why you bring this up, because they do have some similar qualities. And could Fields turn into that? And do Grubb and McDonald think so? And so from that perspective, is a very interesting question that you ask. And I wouldn't be shocked if they do. I think if they were going to do it, they'd be Schneider. You know him; he likes to get the best deal he can. So, how little can he pay for that guy? How little can he pay? Like you said, it's sort of a flyer, because now all those guys that have been drafted recently that have kind of failed, like Mac Jones just being traded for a 6th rounder, they're not worth what they nearly what they were drafted at. So that's an interesting one. We'll see what happens with him, because there's a lot of other things that have to happen first on that quarterback domino thing, and then we get to him, and we get to the Bears, and we get to the Bears in the draft, and we kind of like, all that has to sort itself out, and you see kind of who might be interested in grabbing Fields from them.
Yeah, I like the Fields thing is intriguing. The only thing that worries me is how much you might have to pay this guy pretty quick. Just with the market with these QBs now, and a lot of these guys, the numbers you're seeing, for guys that, I don't know, don't just take up a lot of your cap space, right? So for me, I feel like you'd really have to miss out on a lot of guys. Like, okay, Penix is gone, Rattler's gone, because even Bo Nix maybe, but I don't know. Like I like Fields, I do, but again, like I guess like you said, it comes down to how much does Mike see in him? Like, does he remind him so much of Lamar that he's so sure? And you talk about how smart this guy is, that if he thinks, hey, yes, guys, this guy is so close. Yeah, then hey, yeah, then that's when you might really think about it and say, okay, yeah, we don't mind bringing him in and paying the money for him, especially because you're probably going to have to give up. I mean, that's a whole different discussion what the Bears would want, but there's definitely some capital there you'll have to give up for him as well to get him over here.
Yeah,
what do you think happens, Chris?
I feel like, first of all, that Fields will be traded before the draft, because I think the Bears are going to want to not go into the draft with that hanging over that, having to deal with that. Right. And secondly, there hasn't been, from what I've seen, there's no market for him at the combine. And so there's really now it's kind of about watching these other quarterbacks go where they go, and then seeing who still needs a quarterback, and that creates his market. So that his market will rebuild based on what's left. And then you have to see, okay, is there not really anywhere for him to start now? Are all the starting positions basically taken? And is he going to be a backup wherever he's traded? And that means he's not bringing anything to the Bears. And then that also comes to your next point, Ryan, of what do you have to pay him? Well, if he's not the starter coming in, then he has to earn it. And then you're looking at, okay, you can do the 5th-year option on him, or if you feel like he's earned it, then you got to figure out whether you pay him. Like you said, I mean, that will be definitely a consideration, but it all depends on what is his role. So
I agree with that. Yeah, I mean, if you're giving up next to nothing for him, then it's like play out the 5th year, and then if you want to let him walk, whatever. But if you're giving up a little more, like we've seen in the past, and it almost kind of forces you to be like, we gotta back up the truck for this guy. But yeah, it's interesting. But yeah, I agree with the I think he's gone too before the draft, no question about it.
Who do you think they draft, Chris? Who would you, if you were sitting there, who are your quarterbacks, like your top 3 guys you'd want to see Seattle take?
If they're taking a quarterback?
Yeah.
I mean, I was just talking to a buddy of mine who's a Husky, just like last night or 2 nights ago, and we were talking about Penix and how he can really spin the football. And the one thing that came up as a question mark when we were talking about him is, can he read NFL defenses? Can he go to his progressions? Because at UW, he had such great receivers. He could find someone open pretty fast every time. Right. And he had the O-line. He had great protection for the most part. And I mean, he did get hit in some games, but for the most part, they really cruised on offense. And he has such a great arm to start with. And he seems like a smart guy. It just comes down to, can he read defenses? Are you confident that he can read NFL defenses and he's not going to get picked off left and right because he's late? He's late on everything. So that, to me, that's probably the number one thing beyond his health, which I think those have mostly been answered. Is he able to process NFL speed? So, but if it's a yes, I could see them taking him, and I wouldn't have a problem with it at 16. Because I would feel like they've done their homework, and Ryan Grubb knows him so well. They didn't even talk to him at the combine because they know him. They already know all about him. Yeah. So they don't have to do any talking to him ever because they already know him. So they could just totally sneak up. I mean, it's not even going to be a sneak attack because everyone has already drawn the lines between the Seahawks and Penix. But if he's there, and they really feel like, yep, we're going for the future. And like you guys have said, John Schneider, it's his time to finally do it. Will he do like an Aaron Rodgers type of thing, and finally get another guy there in the middle of the first round? I think it could happen. To totally happen. If not, you've seen a lot of people talking about defensive linemen. There's some good defensive linemen like Byron Murphy and some other guy, Newton, some guys that the people are kind of looking at. And I don't object to those guys either. So I would say either of those positions. And O-line is always there for me, always. If you move down just a little bit and then you get Oregon center or something like that. I would be good probably with any of those picks.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, so kind of one final thing for me looking ahead, obviously, we still have free agency and then obviously the draft. And like you said, this roster could look a lot different than it currently looks, obviously. But so what are your expectations for 2024, and what in your mind would make a successful 24 season?
I think Mike Macdonald's coming in here to win right away. And they've won 9 games each of the last 2 years, and they did that with a really bad defense both times. They're at least a 9-win team to me, at least. And if Mike Macdonald can fix the defense, they'll win 10, 11, maybe even 12. But we don't know that. We don't know if he can do what he's going to do. Until, first of all, we have to see who's going to be on the defense. So that's what starts this week. Who's going to be on the defense? And then, of course, April brings more of that. So then we kind of see that. And then after April, we can say, okay, now this is what I think he can do with all these players that he has. And on offense, it really comes down to, is Ryan Grubb capable of coaching an NFL game and not getting totally dominated by a good defensive coordinator, even though he has all this talent that we know he has, and we've talked about it. So it kind of comes down to some unknowns, some real unknowns. Grubb is an unknown. What is right now the unknown on personnel on defense, but we feel like Mike McDonald will do really good things with it. So the defense is going to come up. If the offense at least stays where it is, they're at least 9-10 wins. So it's just a question of, does the offense somehow tank because the OC wasn't as good as we were hoping, and is the defense not become dominant enough to offset that? So there's like some weights and balances coming into play here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I agree. I mean, I think he is here to compete. Like we said, there's not too many job vacancies where teams won 9 games the last couple of years. The timing just made sense with kind of Pete's time and era over with, and it just happened. Like, sure, yeah, you won 9 games, but we all know it's over. So Mike comes in saying, you know what, I have pieces. I see all the pieces around here, and I just have to tweak things, get some guys in I want. And I'm going for 12, 13 wins. Like you said, there's a lot of knowns, Grubb, all that kind of stuff. But that's kind of how we're looking at it too. And just I think this team is going to compete. That's sort of the biggest thing. But my overall outlook is 2025, being realistic. Like if we go on a crazy run and somehow get hot, I mean, who wouldn't love that? But I think realistically, get the foundation ready to go. Mike comes in, is probably not going to fire on all cylinders right off the hop, but then get this thing ready to really take off. I know Bryce talks about 2011, 2012 days, and just getting those seasons kind of, and then boom, there you go. There's those 13 win teams and Super Bowls and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, to you guys' point of looking kind of ahead of how they put it together. So looking back at Mike Holmgren and Pete Carroll, they both took 3 years to get their actual quarterback. It took them that long to actually acquire and get the guy in place. Russell Wilson was in Pete's 3rd year, and Matt Hasselbeck was in Mike Holmgren's 3rd year. So we could see it go that long if they decide not to draft quarterback in this draft and build up other parts of their team. And to Bryce's point of, hey, 2010, 11, that's what they did. They built up the whole defense. They created a real dominant defense. In 2012, they got the quarterback to go with everything else they'd already put into place. And that is a great way to build a team. Obviously, it's proven. It's happened before, not just with the Seahawks. Other teams have done it too. So the Baltimore Ravens have done it. Other teams have done it. The Pittsburgh Steelers have done it. They have great defenses, good running games, and then they add the quarterback. They add Big Ben. They add Joe Flacco, things like that. Yeah. So like the Seahawks could totally be, following the Baltimore method, having a Baltimore coach. So I could see that happening. And to your guys' point, just taking it, a couple steps here.
Yeah, absolutely. Chris, we really enjoy you hanging out with this, man, coming on 3rd time. It was awesome, man. So we know you got some stuff going on. You got the blog, and where can people find all your stuff, and what else you've been up to, and all that good stuff.
Yeah, so I got the blog at CHawk Talk, and I get a little more active this time of year because it's more fun to look at things that are going on and how the team's being put together and things like that. I've always been into the salary cap and how that works. I've known that for a long time. It's interesting to see people online now on Twitter and stuff. There's a lot more people who are engaged in that, and they really start to understand how it works. So everyone together is understanding what's going on when all of these moves are being made and how much space they have. And people, I think, need to understand that when they have $53 million, they don't have $53 million to use. You got to sort out some other money for the bonuses on your draft picks, for your practice squad people, for injuries during the season. So you got to deduct some money from that. But that's the one thing that some people maybe don't understand as much. But it's good to see people learning that stuff. So that's what I like to help on Twitter too, where I'm CHawk_talk. So that's what I do. That's how I like to do it, and just have good positive conversations with guys like you. And I love being on with you guys because it's so fun to talk about it and see how the team gets built, and then during the season see how it all performs out.
Yeah, no, we appreciate you coming on too. It's awesome hanging out. So guys, yeah, go follow Chris and on Twitter and his blog. A lot of good stuff, a lot of good content. And Chris, we appreciate it again, and would love to have you back on in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll do it again whenever. Thanks, guys.
That was Chris Cluff on the show, third time on the Hawk Zone. Man, what can I say? Just always informative having Chris on. Just getting his perspective on things. Obviously, the quarterback situation is interesting stuff. You know, he's got some guys that know the situation, and brought up Penix just reading defenses. You know, you look at the combine and it's like, hey, this guy's showing up and putting teams on notice and maybe raising his stock. But when it comes down to, hey, wait a second, yeah, he looks good. How can you read your defense? And that's going to come down to the familiarity. At least you have a guy in the system with Grubb that they don't even need to talk to this guy. So that's going to be an internal conversation with them and say, hey, how much do we like this guy at 16?
No, exactly. And there were a couple comments made, I think it was at Senior Bowl in an interview, or that someone asked him some questions about coverages, how you read it. And Penix did quite well in those. But like you said, the fact that Seattle hasn't really even interviewed him, they haven't done a lot of those things, tells me that they've got all the info they need from Grubb, Scott Huff. And you also have to think on the flip side of this, and I don't think a lot of people generally do. You've got Mike McDonald in that room now, and you've got Jay Harbaugh, who just recently went up against Penix in the national championship this year when he was at Michigan, sitting through those meetings, listening to how their team prepared to handle him. So that's where you're going to get both worlds here. And that's why I think, and I know you're not as high on him, but that's where I really think JJ McCarthy comes into this conversation. If he somehow slips and falls into that 10 to 14 range, I could see John going up and getting him instead of Michael Penix, just because he's 21. There's a lot of upside still there with him. And I know people look at him and they go, oh, we didn't throw a lot. He didn't have to at Michigan.
Right.
Can we all get off of that? Friggin', oh, he didn't throw the ball enough. Does anyone remember Russell's first 2 years in Seattle? He wasn't exactly the most prolific passer in Seahawks history his first couple years, because we didn't need to. We ran the ball. He needed to hit the shot play here and there. That was basically it. What did JJ McCarthy do with the running game at Michigan? Hit the shot play here and here, the deep dig, whatever it may be, the post. He wasn't asked to go out and throw it 30, 45 times a game like Michael Penix was. Doesn't mean he's a bad quarterback. And I think that's what people sometimes lose sight of is, oh, because he played in a certain system, that's just what he is. Alex Smith, another prime example. Alex Smith goes into Andy Reid's offense, and all of a sudden he's throwing the ball all over the field in his couple years in Kansas City. What do you mean Alex Smith can do? The dude's a quarterback. He can play the game. And so that's where I get so annoyed when I see some of these people on Twitter and that just bashing JJ McCarthy. And I know I'm with Dan Viens on this, where we really like McCarthy and what he does. And there's a lot of guys, Mel Kiper, a lot of these guys think he's going to go top 10 probably. And he's impressed so many different coaches in that through the process. So it'll be interesting to see. I'm still thinking, depending on how free agency goes and how many gaps they fill on the trenches, if they fill some serious needs there, I think Seattle takes a quarterback at 16.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting the next little bit here with free agency, because like you said, there's so many things that can happen between now and then. And obviously, we love to talk draft like a lot of people do, and we look ahead. We already did a mock draft. But obviously knowing that it can change with their needs, especially if they, fill their needs with free agents. So, and uh, that can easily happen, especially they know their needs. So if they can get it in free agency, let's go. And then it's going to change. So like you said, if they shore up that line with a couple of guys, then they don't have to be like, man, this first rounder needs to be a primo dude in this draft. We will go get Penix, because I mean, they're not going to go sign a free agent quarterback. So it's either Geno is the guy this year, or you get a young guy. I mean, the Fields thing kind of, yeah, that's floating, right? But who knows, that we'll see how that plays out. But yeah, I think that's what you might see. Like you said, it could completely change after free agency, where they feel that they could use that first round or move down or whatever they do. But like I said, I wouldn't be upset either if they go to that day 2 and they get a dude like, Rattler, because we've talked about it. A lot of these guys, they're all prospects at the end of the day. You don't know how Penix is going to be, but as of right now, yeah, he's a guy that's going to go ahead of Rattler. But So if they do fill a need and it looks great, then okay, moving on. And if Penix gets picked up, my next guy's Rattler, and it seems like we're all in agreement. It looks like a lot, we're high on it. Chris was high on it, so
No, it'll be interesting. And I was just reading something that I think Tom Paracello put out saying that the free agency market for interior line is going to explode in this first tampering period. So just so everyone knows,
yeah,
as of 9 a.m. Pacific time
yeah,
tomorrow,
yeah. There we go.
free agency truly actually does start
Yeah,
because players can now talk to teams they couldn't talk. It's called the legal tampering period. Realistically, it means you can agree to terms and sign contracts in
yeah,
principle.
yeah,
And so it'll be very interesting to see, like, and just on the whole quarterback thing, I find it very interesting that the Drew Lock talks kind of died off now. Like it was very heavy there. And I think what they found out going, and this is again where you kind of got to read between the lines. John's come back, and even reporters around here aren't talking much about Drew Lock. As soon as that combine ended, the quarterback chatter in a lot of ways stopped, except for Seattle may draft a guy. And you look at a lot of these national guys like Ben, I think it's Benjamin Albright, who's a pretty tapped in resource, is saying that a lot of teams believe that Seattle is going to take a quarterback and it is going to be Michael Penix.
right.
They don't just say that out there. Like, yes, people think, oh, they throw it out there for clicks. But a lot of these guys that are established writers like Mike Sando and those type of guys, they're very tapped in with their sources and they have good quality sources. So to hear teams saying that they think Seattle's going after a Q, that tells me why we've heard the Gino's not our starter. Even Mike McDonald's I can't wait for him to get to work with Ryan Grubb. But he didn't say I can't wait for Gino to be the starter come opening day.
Yeah, and
And
then oh yeah, go ahead.
hold on, go ahead, man.
No, I was just gonna say, and then how if you're Gino, how do you respond to that? Like, is it just, hey, I've been here like this. This is the journeyman I've been my whole career. It's nothing new to me. I'm just gonna go and I'm gonna compete for a spot. Or you think it's maybe pissing Gino off a little bit if you could get inside his head?
If I'm Gino, and I've been in this situation myself where,
Yeah,
there's a young guy that they bring in, he might have a better skill set than you at some point. Um, it can piss you off for sure because you think that you're being slighted in a way and no one's really paying attention to, what you've done. But this is my view of Gino, and some people may give me flack for this. Take out Gino's last 2 years. So if you really look at Gino's last 2 years, for example, it's really been one solid year. The back half of last year and the front half of 2022.
right,
Cut those years in half, the back end of 2022 and the start of 2023, he was not a great quarterback. He was
right.
okay. He wasn't great. Outside of that, tell me where Gino's been just phenomenal and
Well, that's
blown
it.
your socks off. He hasn't. He was a league journeyman backup
Yeah, yeah,
through multiple teams, not just, oh, he was with one team forever and then moved on. The Jets to the Chargers to the Giants, then to Seattle. And that's why when you're in Gino's shoes, you're constantly going to be in that situation where they're trying to look for the next guy because there are things about your game that do not make you the guy. And
yeah,
so if I'm Gino, like, yeah, you can be pissed off, but do you really want to, like, a prime example really is Russell Wilson in some respects because they didn't really draft a quarterback ever to come in and compete with Russell. And I think that's maybe one thing where they missed out on that whole Russell side of things. They should have brought a guy in and said, hey, look, Russ, yes, you won us a Super Bowl, but you know what? You need to be pushed. You need to be, like you listen to Sherman, a bunch of those guys talk. They were always fighting for their jobs every day and competing. Russ never really had to do that in Seattle. Who was going to knock Russell off? Alex Magoo, Geno Smith? Not really. None of those guys really were going to push Russ.
yeah.
So that's where I think for Geno, yeah, be pissed off, but come with a I'm going to fucking prove you wrong
Yep.
attitude.
Well, exactly. And I think you brought up the Russ thing, which is interesting. I mean, a little different situation, whereas he was the starter his whole career. That being said, also, you talk you when you brought up Sherman, those guys, there was always that divide. They always felt a little slight. They always felt, they always felt like, Pete wanted him to be the poster child of the team. Whether how much truth to that, who knows? But that was sort of the thing. So it was like, why do we need to draft this guy now? And we also know Pete's history is sort of holding on to guys a little longer, or a little too loyal to certain guys and this and that. You and I know the decline that Russ we saw the last few seasons and this and that. But that's to me where that kind of comes from, where they didn't feel like, because we talked about how John might have pulled that deal the year before. So a lot of that's Pete stuff. So moving forward, yeah, with the Geno thing, I think it's going to be good. Competition's always good. You bring in a young guy, you compete. It's only going to help Geno. It's only going to better his game. And I think, yeah, he knows, hey, man, I've been a career junior guy. I've had to claw and scratch and scrap my whole entire career. This is nothing new to me. So, that was a refreshing thing when we went from Russ to Geno, was just that breath of fresh air. The prima donna stuff was gone. So I agree. I don't think you're going to see that coming on. It's not going to be anything that's going to now appear with him, right? And yeah, the Drew Lock thing, man, I'm glad that went away, because yeah,
Starting to get worrisome, weren't you?
he can move on, and yeah, it's just, he can move on. Let's get a young guy in here, and we'll see what happens. But
so just for a point of reference, just so everyone understands what John Schneider has successfully done in basically the last 2 weeks, the Seahawks basically we're going to walk into the new league year with 12 million in cap space after they restructured Geno. In 15 days, he's taken that and made it $55 million. Realistically, $40 million, 42, give or take, because you need your 10 or so, 10 to 12 million for practice squad and draft picks and whatnot. But he essentially almost tripled that value in 15 days.
Yeah, it's amazing. And the only thing, and I brought that up with Chris, the only one I wasn't too sure about was when you were going to cut Jamal, and he thought, that I wasn't concerned about that June 1st thing, and because obviously you can save some money if that's when you cut him. But I actually like when they did it. I mean, what is the point to save some money? Sure, you have a little extra money to play with, whatever. But this guy, I mean, he's just become, at this point, would just become a distraction on this team. And you'd be wondering, the June's a long ways away. So I think just doing it all at once and getting ready and saying, this is what we have available for free agency, and we're ready to go. And I really, really like what they've done. So, but yeah, man, other than that, guys, go follow Chris, his blog CHawk Talk, and you can also find him on Twitter. Go find him, give him a follow, and like we said, a lot of good stuff, a lot of good content, and especially if you want to everything Seahawks, man, he's got some good stuff out there. So
100%, go follow him, guys, and please keep commenting on our YouTube page. We love interacting with you guys and the comments you bring up and such. And, we love interacting with you guys. And, we've got some pretty good guests coming up in our next few pods here. And, our next one, I believe we got Rob Staten.
Rob's coming
back to do, we'd be in free agency for a week at that point. So kind of a recap of week one and looking ahead to the draft. So keep your ears posted and for that one coming up. But yeah, looking forward to it.
Yeah, man. So that's it for us tonight, and we'll catch you guys on the next one.
Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.